Let me be very clear about something before I begin this account. I, Vorak 9, Senior Field Correspondent for the Galactic Broadcasting Consortium, have covered 47 wars, 3 extinction events, 2 accidental star collapses, and 1 deeply unfortunate diplomatic incident involving a Krellian ambassador and a bowl of fermented bog moss. I have never, in all of my 412 years of professional journalism, filed a report while hiding inside a storage crate, until today. The crate smells like something called beef jerky. I found a half-eaten packet of it wedged between 2 oxygen canisters. I do not know what animal contributed to this product. I am choosing not to find out. What I do know is that it is somehow both revolting and fascinating at the same time, which, as it turns out, is a perfect description of the species that left it here. Allow me to go back to the beginning. You deserve the full story. All of it. Even the parts that are going to make the High Council of Xenobiological Studies very, very uncomfortable. It started, as most catastrophic things do, with an absolutely terrible idea that sounded perfectly reasonable at the time. The Malorvian hegemony, bless their 6 hearts and their complete absence of survival instincts, decided to establish a mining colony on a planet called HFY. Beautiful planet, actually. Lush, green, teeming with life, the kind of planet that makes you want to sit down with a warm beverage and contemplate the universe's generosity. The Malorvians did not sit down. They brought drilling equipment. This was unfortunate because Ketra 5 happened to be within the hunting range of a Vorkai. For those of you who are blissfully unaware of what a Vorkai is, congratulations. You have lived a sheltered and happy life. A Vorkai is approximately the size of a small city block, possesses 17 separate predatory organs, generates a bioelectric field capable of disrupting any technology within a 3-kilometer radius, and, according to every threat classification system in the known galaxy, sits comfortably at the very top of the apex predator hierarchy. Nothing hunts a Vorkai. Nothing even considers it. There are ancient Malorvian proverbs that translate roughly to, if you see a Vorkai, you are already dead and your only remaining task is to stop moving so it does not get bored. The Vorkai that arrived at Ketra 5 was a mature adult, which meant it was approximately 900 years old and had presumably eaten things that would make a seasoned combat veteran rethink their life choices. The mining colony's distress beacon went active at 0300 standard hours. The signal was short. It was also, if I am being honest, somewhat wet-sounding. This is where I come in. The Galactic Broadcasting Consortium received the distress call and, in their infinite wisdom, decided this was a story worth covering. They sent me, because, as my editor Prin Vasak so cheerfully explained, you are the only correspondent currently available who has documented a species extinction event, so you already know what a complete disaster looks like. Prin Vasak has never once in 40 years of working together said anything that made me feel good about myself. This is consistent. I arrived at Ketra 5 aboard the GBC survey vessel Relentless Curiosity, which is a deeply ironic name for a ship crewed by beings who were, at this moment, visibly reconsidering their relentlessness. Captain Bevra 11, a tall, blue-scaled Thenian female with the kind of calm that only comes from having survived too many genuinely terrible situations, stood at the observation deck and stared down at the planet below. The Vorkai has been stationary for 6 hours, she said, tapping the sensor display with one claw. It settled near the colony's central structure. We are picking up no life signs from the Malorvian crew. So they are all dead, I said. Almost certainly. And we are here because, Bevra 11 said. And here she paused in the way that people pause when they are about to say something that they genuinely wish they did not have to say. There is another ship on the surface, one that arrived approximately 2 hours after the distress beacon activated. It is not Malorvian. It is not any registered hegemony vessel. The hull configuration does not match any database in the consortium's records. I looked at the sensor display. She was right. The ship was small, boxy, and had clearly been modified so many times by so many different hands that it no longer resembled any original design. It was, in the most diplomatic possible terms, an absolute mess. Antennae stuck out at wrong angles. There were what appeared to be external fuel tanks bolted on with materials that did not match the hull. One of the landing struts was visibly shorter than the others, giving the whole vessel a slight but permanent lean, like a building that had given up on architecture as a concept. Who, I said slowly, flies something like that? Bevra 11 looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. And I had known her for 30 years. It was the expression of someone who had a piece of information they had been sitting on for 2 hours because they needed to prepare themselves emotionally before sharing it. Humans, she said. Now, A brief interlude for those of you who are not current on your xenobiological briefings. Humans are a species from a small planet called Earth, located in what the rest of the galaxy refers to as the Quiet Arm, because nothing interesting was supposed to be there. They are bipedal, soft-skinned, absurdly fragile by most measurable standards, and have a lifespan that most species would consider a generous lunch break. They were formally introduced to the galactic community approximately 60 standard years ago. The introduction did not go as expected. The Thenian delegation had prepared a very thorough welcome ceremony. They had organized musical performances, prepared food from 17 different systems, and drafted a 17,000-word document formally welcoming humanity to the greater community of sentient life. The first human delegation arrived 4 hours late. Their lead diplomat, a short woman named Greta Sobol, apologized by explaining that they had gotten lost, stopped at what she called a roadside stand, and had each consumed something called gas station sushi, the effects of which I will not describe here except to say that the ceremony had to be relocated. Greta Sobol then shook everyone's hand, called the Thenian High Counselor Buddy, and asked if there was coffee. There was not. She seemed genuinely disappointed. This was humanity's introduction to the galaxy. It did not get less confusing from there. Vac on Ketra 5. Back to me, Vorak 9, senior correspondent, standing on the observation deck of the Relentless Curiosity, staring at sensor data that made no sense. The Vorkai, I said carefully, is still stationary? Yes, Bevra 11 said. And the human ship landed 2 hours ago? Yes, and the humans are? Outside the ship, Bevra 11 said. She pulled up the long-range visual feed. It was grainy at this distance, but workable. I could see the bulk of the Vorkai, a massive dark shape that blocked out a significant portion of the colony's central clearing. I could see the wreckage of the Malorvian equipment. I could also see, and this required me to adjust the magnification 3 times because I was convinced I was misreading the data. 2 human figures standing approximately 40 meters from the Vorkai. They were not running. Are those? I leaned closer to the screen. Are those 2 humans standing there eating something? Bevra 11's jaw did a thing that I had never seen a Thenian jaw do before. That is what the visual data suggests, yes. One of the humans appeared to be sitting on a piece of wreckage. The other was standing with their hands in their pockets, which is a posture that communicates in human body language something along the lines of, I am waiting for something to happen and I am not particularly concerned about it. They were both looking at the Vorkai. The Vorkai, 900 years old, apex predator, destroyer of colonies, was looking back at them. Nobody was moving. How long have they been doing that? I asked. 47 minutes, Bevra 11 said. I sat down. I made the decision, which Prin Vasak later described as the least professionally defensible choice in your entire career, to go to the surface. My reasoning was as follows. I was a journalist. There was clearly a story happening. The story appeared to involve a Vorkai, 2 humans, and some kind of food product. This was, objectively speaking, the most interesting thing that had happened in the known galaxy since the Prillian Collective accidentally broadcast their internal government debates to every communication relay in the outer systems. I was not going to sit in orbit and watch it on a grainy sensor feed. Bevra 11 tried to talk me out of it. She made several excellent points. I thanked her for all of them and got in the shuttle anyway. I landed 2 kilometers from the colony site, which felt like a reasonable compromise between too far to see anything and directly inside the Vorkai's bioelectric disruption field. I had a recording unit, a translation matrix, and the beef jerky which I had taken from the storage area because I had not eaten since 0200, and the shuttle had nothing except emergency ration bars which taste exactly like a regrettable decision. I moved through the colony's outer structures carefully. Most of the buildings were intact. Whatever had happened here was quick. The Malorvians, to their credit, had built sturdy structures. To their detriment, sturdy structures do not do much against something that weighs as much as a geological feature. I rounded the corner of the main processing facility and stopped. The Vorkai was enormous up close. I had seen photographs, I had seen documentary footage. I had not, until this moment, fully processed what the size of a city block truly meant when it was standing 20 meters in front of you, its 17 predatory organs each pointed in a slightly different direction, its massive sensory cluster rotating slowly on its anterior node. It was looking at the humans. The humans were, I can now confirm from personal observation, eating sandwiches. One of them, a broad-shouldered male with a beard that suggested he had strong opinions about grooming routines, was chewing thoughtfully and watching the Vorkai the way you might watch a neighbor's unusually large dog, wary but not panicked, curious but not stupid. The second human was a woman, shorter, with her hair pulled back, sitting cross-legged on the wreckage of what had once been a Malorvian power relay. She had a notebook. She appeared to be writing in it. She was taking notes. On the Vorkai. While eating a sandwich, I will pause here to allow you, the reader, to absorb this information at your own pace. I activated my translation matrix and moved closer, close enough to hear them. Not close enough, I decided, to be involved in whatever was about to happen to them. It's not moving, the man said. His name, I would learn later, was Dex Moreau. He was, according to the manifest I accessed later, a licensed salvage operator with 17 years of experience, 4 commendations from the Outer Systems Trade Authority, and 1 very significant outstanding fine from the Thenian Port Authority for unauthorized modification of a docking clamp. He was 39 years old. He was currently holding what appeared to be a sandwich made with an alarming quantity of a yellow condiment. It moved earlier, the woman said without looking up from her notebook. Her name was Suki Ohan. She was, and I am still processing this, a xenobiologist, a credentialed one, with a doctorate from the University of New Helsinki and 3 published papers on predator behavior in non-carbon atmospheric environments. When we first got out of the ship, it turned the whole front section toward us. That's significant. Because that means it got a good smell of us, Suki said. And then it stopped moving, which means it doesn't know what to do with us. Dex looked at the Vorkai. The Vorkai's sensory cluster rotated toward them again, paused, then rotated away. It keeps doing that, he said. Yes, that's weird. Extremely, Suki agreed pleasantly. I crouched behind a collapsed wall section and kept recording, because this was either going to be the greatest piece of journalism I had ever produced, or it was going to be a very short final entry. The Vorkai made a sound. It was low, subsonic in its lower registers, and it did something unfortunate to my inner ear. But above the subsonic baseline there was a higher frequency component, and my translation matrix, after a 4-second processing delay during which I genuinely reconsidered every professional choice I had ever made, rendered it as something close to, "What are you?" Not a question, more like a statement of confusion expressed as a question. The tone, insofar as a Vorkai has tone, suggested the kind of unsettled uncertainty that very large things feel when they encounter something that does not fit into any existing category. Kuithi looked up from her notebook. She looked at the Vorkai for a moment. Then she said in a perfectly conversational voice, "We're humans, from Earth. You?" There was a very long silence. "We are not afraid," the Vorkai said. "Oh, we're afraid," Dex said, eating his sandwich. "I'm absolutely terrified. I've just found that running usually makes things worse." Another silence. "You smell," the Vorkai said, "like nothing I have encountered before." Suki wrote something in her notebook. "Yeah, that's probably the antibiotics, the sunscreen, and whatever Dex put on his sandwich. What is in that thing? Mustard. That is a horrifying amount of mustard. I like mustard." The Vorkai's sensory cluster rotated fully toward Dex. Then, slowly, it began to back away. One massive step, then another. Its 17 predatory organs, each one capable of ending a Malorvian mining crew, retracted slightly. Its posture, if a 900-year-old apex predator can be said to have a posture, shifted into something that a xenobiologist, and coincidentally someone hiding behind a wall 20 meters away, would describe as confused retreat. It was not running, but it was definitely leaving. "Huh," Dex said. He looked at his sandwich. He looked at the Vorkai. He looked at his sandwich again. "Is it the mustard?" "Write that down," Suki told him. "I don't have a notebook. Use your communicator. It's out of battery." "Dex, I forgot to charge it. We talked about this." The Vorkai took 3 more steps back. Then it turned, all of it, the massive bulk of it, and it moved into the tree line with a speed that something its size absolutely should not have been capable of. The ground shook. Birds, or whatever Ketra 5's equivalent of birds were, exploded out of the canopy in a panicked cloud. Then the forest was still. The 2 humans stood in the empty clearing. Suki closed her notebook. Dex finished his sandwich. The sun was setting over the colony ruins in shades of orange and gold that had no right being as beautiful as they were given the circumstances. "Well," Dex said finally, "that was something." "It smelled you," Suki said. "It smelled my lunch." "Same thing." I stayed behind the wall for another 3 minutes, just to be certain. Then I stood up, brushed debris off my recording equipment, and walked toward the 2 humans with the professional composure of someone who had absolutely not been hiding and had absolutely not eaten a human's beef jerky out of anxiety. They both looked at me. "Journalist?" Suki asked. "Senior correspondent," I said. "Galactic Broadcasting Consortium, Varek 9. Cool," Dex said. He looked at my recording equipment. Did you get all of that? Every moment, I said. He nodded. Great. Can you send us a copy? Nobody's going to believe us otherwise. I want to begin part 2 with a correction to something I said in my previous account. I described Dex Moreau as someone who had strong opinions about grooming routines. Having now spent approximately 14 hours in his company, I can confirm that this was incorrect. Dex Moreau has no grooming routine. What he has is a complete and genuine indifference to the concept of one, which is somehow more unsettling than having opinions about it. He also has, and I cannot stress this enough, a truly extraordinary quantity of mustard in his ship's food storage. I counted the containers. There were 9 of them. 9. For a crew of 2, on a salvage vessel. I asked him about this. He said, "You never know when you're going to need mustard. I have been reporting on the galaxy's most complex civilizations for over 400 years. I have interviewed heads of state, war criminals, and one being who claimed to be made entirely of memory and regret. None of them have ever said anything that confused me as much as that sentence. Let us resume from where we left off. The clearing, the sunset, the Vorkai retreating into the tree line. Suki Ohan, xenobiologist, calmly closing her notebook as if she had just finished observing something mildly interesting at a nature reserve rather than surviving an encounter with the galaxy's most lethal organism. Dex Moreau licking mustard off his thumb. Me, Vorak 9, senior correspondent, walking toward them with my recording equipment and the tattered remains of my professional dignity. I asked the obvious question, the one any reasonable journalist, any reasonable sentient being, any reasonable organism with a functioning survival instinct would ask first. Why, I said, did you land here? Suki looked at me. The distress beacon. Yes, but the Malorovians are. I gestured at the general evidence of what had happened to the Malorvians. Dead, yes, Suki said without any particular coldness, more with the tone of someone stating a fact that is sad but not surprising. We know. We picked up the Vorkai's biosignature before we entered atmosphere. Standard predator alert on the scanner. And you landed anyway. Of course, she said. I looked at Dex. Dex shrugged with the easy confidence of a man who has been making decisions that other species would classify as suicidal for so long that they no longer register as such. She wanted a look, he said. I have been trying to track a mature Vorkai in a natural habitat for 6 years, Suki said. She opened her notebook to a page that was dense with handwriting, diagrams, and what appeared to be a very careful sketch of the Vorkai's sensory cluster. Do you have any idea how rare this is? Yes, I said, because they are nearly impossible to find without being immediately killed. Exactly, she said, as if this were a point in favor of the decision rather than against it. I turned off my recording unit for a moment, not for any professional reason. I just needed a brief pause to process what I was dealing with. I stood there in the ruins of the Malorovian colony on a planet that smelled like wet vegetation and industrial coolant, watching a human woman flip through notes on the thing that had just killed an entire crew, and I had the distinct and overwhelming sensation that I was missing something fundamental about how this species experiences the concept of danger. I turned the recording unit back on. This was absolutely going in the story. We moved into the colony's main structure for the night. The building was intact enough, and more importantly, it had walls, which felt psychologically important even if walls were not going to do anything meaningful against a Vorkai if it decided to return. I raised this point. Dex nodded and said, yeah, but it feels better, right? And I hated that he was correct. Suki set up a monitoring station using equipment from their ship. It was, like their ship, visibly a combination of several different generations of technology that had been persuaded into working together through a combination of expertise and what Dex called aggressive cable management, which appeared to mean that wires were taped to every surface with a cheerful disregard for aesthetics. The sensors she assembled could detect the Vorkai's bioelectric signature within a 2-kilometer radius. Range isn't great, she admitted, calibrating the display. No, I said, it is not. Better than nothing. Is it? Genuinely, is it? A 2-kilometer detection range on something that can cover ground at the speed we saw it move this evening gives us approximately, I ran the calculation in my secondary processing lobe, 11 seconds of warning. 12, Dex said from somewhere behind a wall where he appeared to be making food. 12, I corrected. That is 12 seconds. More than enough time, Suki said. For what? She looked at me with an expression that I had come to recognize over the course of the evening as her default setting. It was the expression of someone who was genuinely interested in everything, genuinely untroubled by most things, and had made a private peace with the universe's tendency to try and kill people. To learn something, she said simply. I communicated with Bevra 11 on the relentless curiosity via tight beam, explained the situation, and listened to a silence on the other end that spoke volumes about her opinion of my current location. Then she told me she would maintain orbit and that I should check in every 2 hours. Then she told me to not get eaten by the alien, which was the most practical advice anyone had given me all day. At 0140 standard hours, the sensor went off. Not the gentle alert tone it had been set to produce. Suki had it configured to escalate based on proximity, and what it produced at 0140 was not a gentle tone, it was the sound of a system working very hard to communicate urgency through a very small speaker. It was, I will say, effective. I was awake in approximately 1 second. Dex was awake in approximately 4 seconds, which given what followed I found impressive. Suki was already at the monitoring station, leaning over the display, her hair loose and her expression doing something I had not seen it do before. It was not fear exactly. It was the sharpening that happens to a face when the brain behind it suddenly moves from background processing to full active engagement. "It is back?" I asked. She said. I looked at the display. There were 3 bioelectric signatures, 3 Vorkai signatures, each enormous, each moving through the forest toward the colony with a slow and deliberate pace that was somehow more frightening than speed would have been. Speed is urgent. Speed means panic. Slow means certain. Slow means they have already decided. 3, I said. Yep, Dex said. He had, and I noticed this with a mixture of admiration and genuine concern, already put his boots on. He was also, I noticed a half-second later, holding a very large thermos. "What is in that?" I asked. "Coffee," he said. "You are facing 3 Vorkai and you brought coffee. It was already made," he said, as if this were a complete explanation, which I suppose for Dex Moreau it probably was. Suki made a decision that I want to describe carefully, because it is the kind of decision that, when reported accurately, will cause significant debate in the xenobiological studies community, and also possibly get me fired, and also possibly result in this account being classified, which would be a shame because it is extremely good journalism. She decided to go outside. "I want to be clear." I said no. I said no several times and in several different ways. I cited the sensor data. I cited the fact that 1 Vorkai had already demonstrated unpredictable behavior and we did not understand why. I cited the fact that there were now 3 of them. I cited the darkness. I cited the fact that the Malorvian crew had been considerably better equipped than we were and had not survived. I cited, and I am not proud of this, my own professional responsibility to not witness things that would give me what humans apparently call career trauma. Suki listened to all of this with polite attention. Then she picked up her notebook and her scanner and she walked to the door. "You are going to want to film this," she said to me. She was right. I hated that she was right. I followed her. Dex followed both of us, carrying his coffee with the energy of a man going for a slightly unusual evening walk. The clearing was silver gray in the moonlight, Ketra 5 having 2 small moons that provided modest but workable illumination. The Vorkai came out of the tree line from 3 different directions, which is a hunting pattern, which any species that has ever studied predator behavior would recognize immediately as a hunting pattern, which is precisely what it was. And none of us were prey animals in any biological sense that the Vorkai would have encountered before. They were bigger than I expected, even knowing the size. The original Vorkai, the one from the afternoon, was slightly larger than the other 2. I assumed, though I could not confirm, that it had brought younger specimens. Why it had done this was unclear, and would remain unclear until Suki figured it out, which she did, but I am getting ahead of myself. They stopped at the edge of the clearing. All 3 of them, 17 predatory organs each, aimed inward, a semicircle of things that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting purely for the purpose of ending other things. Suki walked to the center of the clearing and stood there. I stopped at the doorway. I want to state for the record that I had my recording unit running and that I remained at the doorway for professional reasons, specifically the professional reason that a dead journalist cannot file a story. The lead Vorkai's sensory cluster rotated. It was smelling, processing. All 3 of them were processing. Their sensory apparatus working through whatever the human scent profile was sending them. And then, and I watched this happen in real time, something changed in the way they were standing. They were not relaxing. That is too gentle a word. What they were doing was something more like recalibrating. Like a predator that has gone to close a trap and found that what is inside the trap does not match any category the trap was designed for. The lead Vorkai spoke. My translation matrix, now warmed up and better calibrated than the previous evening, gave me a cleaner rendering. "You came back," it said. "I never left," Suki said. "You are the same one from before. Yes, my name is Suki. This is Dex. That is Vorak 9. He is a journalist. We are not a threat to you. A pause, then from the lead Vorakai. We know. Suki wrote something in her notebook. Then why did you bring 2 others? Another pause, longer this time. The 2 younger Vorakai were still pointing all their predatory organs at us, but their posture had something uncertain in it. The way a young animal looks when it is watching an older one do something it does not understand. Because, the lead Vorakai said, and I want you to understand that I am transcribing this as accurately as my translation matrix allows. I wanted them to see. Suki looked up from her notebook. For the first time since I had met her, she appeared genuinely surprised. It was brief, just a half-second widening of the eyes. Then she got herself back together and she said in a completely level voice, "See what? What you are." The Vorakai said, "I have hunted on 49 worlds. I have encountered 612 different species. I know what prey smells like. I know what threat smells like. I know what dead things smell like. I know what things that are about to be dead smell like." Another pause. "I do not know what you smell like. We are humans," Suki said. "That word means nothing to me. It means we are from a place you have not been," Dex said, from behind me and slightly to the left, where he was leaning against the doorframe drinking coffee. "Which is probably why you do not recognize the smell." The Vorakai's sensory cluster moved toward Dex with what I can only describe as concentrated attention. "What is that scent? The warm one, the bitter one?" "Coffee," Dex said. "It is strange." "It is excellent," Dex said firmly. Suki had now filled 3 pages of her notebook and showed no signs of stopping. "When you encountered us earlier," she said to the lead Vorakai, "you retreated. Why?" The answer that came back through my translation matrix required a second pass to render properly. What the Vorakai communicated was something like this. When a hunter encounters something that does not fit into known categories, the instinct is not fear, exactly. It is a deeper and more ancient response. It is the response that fires when the universe presents something that should not be possible. When the hierarchy of things, the hierarchy that every apex predator understands at the level of bone and blood, produces a category that has no ranking, we were unranked. We were not prey. We were not rival predators. We were not harmless background creatures. We were something that smelled of chemicals and cooked food and biology that had no context in any ecosystem the Vorakai had ever moved through. We were in the most literal and fundamental sense unknowable, and the apex predator at the top of the known galaxy's threat hierarchy had, when faced with something unknowable, done what every creature does when the rules stop working. It had backed away. Suki closed her notebook. She looked at the 3 Vorakai for a long moment. Then she looked at me, and the expression on her face was the same one I imagine every scientist has worn at the exact moment they understand something for the first time. It is a look that is quiet and enormous at the same time. It was not the smell that scared it, she said. It was the fact that it could not identify what the smell meant. "Yes," I said. "We were outside the taxonomy," she said. "Yes, we were not in the predator's model of the world." "Suki," Dex said. "Yes?" "I think the Vorakai is trying to say something." She turned. The lead Vorakai had moved closer, which should have produced some kind of physiological alarm response in me and in fact produced a very significant one that I managed to suppress through the application of what I choose to call professional composure, and what Bevra 11 later described as dumb luck. It stopped 3 meters from Suki. "The young ones," it said. "They need to learn what you are, so they do not make the error I made." "The error of retreating?" Suki asked. "The error," the Vorakai said, "of not understanding." Suki stood very still. Then she did something that I recorded and that has been, in the months since this night, replayed more times across every broadcasting network in the known galaxy than anything I have ever filed in my career. She reached into her jacket pocket. She produced a small wrapped object. She unwrapped it. She held it out toward the Vorakai. It was a piece of chocolate. "We have a tradition," she said, "of sharing food when we want to show we are not a threat." The Vorakai's sensory cluster examined the chocolate with extraordinary care. The 2 younger ones pressed closer, their own sensors working. Whatever the chocolate smelled like to a Vorakai, it appeared to be as strange and uncategorizable as everything else about us. The lead Vorakai made a sound that my translation matrix, working hard, rendered as something close to, "This is a remarkable smell. It is nothing." "It is cocoa and sugar," Suki said. "It is nothing I know," the Vorakai said, and that is remarkable. I filed the story at 0600 standard hours from the surface of Ketra 5, sitting in the ruins of the Malorvian colony with my back against a wall that still had Drilling Crew Alpha stenciled on it in hegemony script, while 3 Vorkai moved through the clearing 20 meters away. The 2 younger ones kept circling back to look at Dex, who had by this point started a second thermos of coffee and appeared entirely content with the situation in the way that only a human can appear entirely content with a situation that is by every objective measure completely unhinged. The story ran within 4 hours across every major network. The headline, which Prin Vasak chose without consulting me and which I found somewhat reductive, was, "Humans confuse Galaxy's apex predator into leaving them alone." The subheading, which I also did not write but which I grudgingly admit is accurate, read, "Creature with no natural enemies encounters species with no natural fear response. Unclear who should be more concerned." The High Council of Xenobiological Studies requested a full briefing. The Thenian Defense Ministry requested a meeting with the human government. The Galactic Broadcasting Consortium gave me a commendation which Prin Vasak delivered via text message with no additional commentary, which from Prin Vasak is basically a standing ovation. Suki Ohan published a preliminary paper 3 weeks later titled, "Olfactory Disruption of Apex Predator Territorial Behavior in First Contact Scenarios, a Case Study." It is 47 pages long and extraordinarily thorough, and the section on the chocolate interaction is genuinely one of the most precise pieces of scientific observation I have ever read. Dex Moreau went back to salvage work. He is currently operating in the Outer Ring. His ship's manifest now lists, among standard equipment, 18 containers of mustard. He added 9 more. When asked by port authorities to explain the mustard, he reportedly said, "You never know what you're going to run into." The lead Vorkai was tracked, at a distance for several months by a xenobiological survey team. It never again attacked a colony that registered any human biosignature. Neither did the 2 younger ones. The survey team's report noted that Vorkai, as a species, appear to have very long memories. They noted this carefully. They noted it the way you note something that is potentially very significant without being entirely certain whether it is significant in a good way or a deeply complicated one. I, Vorak 9, Senior Field Correspondent, am writing this final section not from a storage crate but from my office on Then Prime, which is comfortable and temperature-controlled and smells like nothing more interesting than recycled air. I have a cup of something the office assistant calls human-style coffee, which she sourced from the new import station on the east side of the city. It is extraordinary, it is strange and bitter and warm, and it has no equivalent in anything I have ever tasted. I think about that clearing a great deal. I think about what it means that the most dangerous organism in the charted galaxy backed away not from a weapon, not from a superior predator, not from fire or sound or pain, but from 2 soft-bodied, short-lived, structurally fragile beings who smelled like things that did not exist in any taxonomy it knew. I think about what it says about a species that they moved, at least in part, outside every system of classification, that they arrived in the galaxy 60 years ago, showed up late to their own welcome ceremony, asked for coffee, and have been quietly, consistently, cheerfully refusing to fit into any category anyone builds for them ever since. The Vorkai did not know what to do with something it could not rank, something that was not prey, not predator, not anything with a place in the order of things. Something that stood in an open clearing in the dark and held out a piece of chocolate like it was the most natural gesture in the universe. Maybe that is the thing. Maybe that is the whole thing. In a galaxy where everything has a rank and every rank has a rule and every rule tells you what to fear and what to ignore and what to hunt, the most dangerous thing you can possibly be is something that does not fit the rule at all. The humans, as far as I can tell, have always known this. They may be the only ones who do. I am going to finish this coffee. Then I am going to start on the follow-up piece about the Vorkai behavioral study. Prin Vasak wants it by Thursday, he said, and I am quoting directly. "Try not to get inside the habitat this time." I told him I would think about it. "I have not decided yet."